Hello, Blaine Gray here from Plastering for Beginners, and today's video I'm going to show you how to plaster onto concrete blocks. So what we call this, and what a lot of plasterers call it, is float and set. And what I'm going to do is show you how to use a backing plaster onto a masonry background. We're going to apply it, we're going to float it, and then we're going to plaster it on the same day. This is under the terms of float and set, but for anyone else who's beginning, who's starting out, this is basically a term that we use for backing plaster to concrete blocks or any masonry backgrounds. So I'm going to go through the whole process, show you exactly how to do it in today's video. Let's start, let's do it now. Cheers. Okay, so the tools we need for the job, we've got a mixer, got a big bucket, separate to my plastering bucket. This is just what I use for hardwall bonding adhesive, water in, got a straight edge, 1.8. Got a trowel. I'm going to try and break in my new Marshall towel. I'll need a bit of work, so I'll start today. Bucket, trowel, hook, and a float, which will turn into a devil's float, and I'll show you how to do that in a bit. So that's tools for the job. Let's get going. We'll be using this. This is Featheredge Hardball from British Gypsum. This is what we're going to use to apply onto any masonry background. That's the only plaster you should use, really. And you always throw it into a mix of water first, mix it together. I'll show you a clip on that. So we'll always use hardwall for masonry. This is how you want it. Nice and thick, like your mum's porridge. Okay, so let's get this going. We've got stage one, and our job now is to apply the hardwall. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give a bit of water to the concrete blocks here. I'm just going to give it a light haze with my sprayer. Nothing major, but I just want to give it a bit of hydration before I start applying the hardwall, because this is extremely porous. What it's going to do is just going to take all the moisture out of the plaster, and it's really gonna suck in fast. So if we give it a bit of a break before we start, give the blocks a little bit of a soften down with some water, makes it a bit easier, makes the process a bit easier in terms of when it comes to ruling off as well. So the way I do it, I apply a thin coat of hardwall first. This is a coat that's going to take the beating. This is where the blocks are going to take all the moisture from this first bit here. And just apply a nice thin layer. Nothing crazy, don't worry about it being flat. Just get it on the walls. I'm going to get told off from this for a few plasterers here, because I'm rendering left to right. That's not known, but I'll show you how to do it in a bit. But the main aim of this is to get that plaster on the blocks, a nice thin layer first. And yeah, don't worry about it being flat, but just make sure you don't put it on too thick. It's the top coat that we're going to get flat, and this is just what's going to take a beating. It just makes it easier to get the thickness on. As you can see, my mix is it's not as thick as what I'd have in my bonding, and that's because the concrete blocks are so porous. It's just really going to suck the moisture out. I just want to give myself as much time as possible. So a nice thin coat, get it on, take your time, don't mess about. Like we said, just get it on. And what we're going to do is going to put another coat on top of this, and that's going to be our thickness. As you can see, I've got a bit of a plasterboard to the right. That's basically a timber frame. So we're putting our hardwall to that. That's going to be our guide, if you want. That's going to be our go-to point of reference, and that's what we're going to be ruling off to get the wall straight. Okay, so now we're just going to apply the main thickness of this wall. Again, this is basically another coat, and what I've done, by the time I'm putting this hardwall on, the first coat is pretty much firmed up because the concrete blocks just sap the moisture out. And this is how the old school boys, and actually how you probably taught, when you're using solid plaster, when you're using hardwall or any backing plaster render, you plaster right to left, and you work following from the right, and that's because on your left hand you can catch any falling plaster with your hawk, and you keep the hawk underneath where you're working so you can catch anything that falls. The other good thing about plastering on top of the first layer is it gets a nice grip to the original coat, so I find you don't seem as much falling down, which is always quite easy. So just following the first coat we've got, just whack it on and put quite a lot on. And what I like to do when I'm rendering, or again applying thickness as a backing plaster, I like to apply more than what I need, so when it comes to ruling off, I don't keep reapplying plaster, picking up the trowel, picking up the hawk. We do everything at once. So I've got quite a heavy coat of hardwall on there. Now it comes to ruling off. Again, I'm using this frame to the right. That's my guidance. That's what warrants where I'm going to, and that's what governs the thickness of this wall. So if you weren't doing this, then you'd want a level and you want to set screed blocks up, which is basically where you set up tracks out of solid render, and then you can fill in from the middle. I'll try and set a video about that up in the future actually, but for now I'll show you how it works using this frame on the right plasterboard as my governing point. So when you're ruling off, you just want to rule off. Again, I'm not putting any more render on now because I've put enough on at the beginning. What I'm doing is taking it off, and you just want to rule it off as tight as possible. What I'm using is a Featheredge. Love using this. This is all I use when I'm doing any type of work like this. And as you can see, you can get it nice and flat, really flat, but it does take practice. What I've done is take it further down the clip. Now this gets harder. What you're using now is I've got to follow the straight edge with the side to the right that I've already rendered. Obviously that's still going to be wet, so you've got to be really careful when using the straight edge at this point. If you get this wrong, you're going to dig into the work that you've done previously, and it's really going to make a meal out of it. So this is where practice comes in. So when you're doing it, just take your time. You know, don't be thorough, and just get used to using the straight edge, because it does take some practice. Don't get me wrong. It does take some work getting used to it. But following the same routine, work in sections, and then rule it off as you go. You don't want to do a big, huge area and rule it off, because it'll dry. What happens, the render starts to pull, the hardwall will pull, it'll just be a nightmare. So I always work in little patches and then reel it off as I go. So all the hardwall is on now. What I'm doing is I'm just straightening it up with this straight edge. So at the moment I'm just working horizontally. What you should always do is also use your straight edge vertically as well. This way you're going to get a true line on whether the wall is completely straight. If you only rule it off one way, then you've not really done the job right. If you rule it both ways, that way you've got enough scrutiny on both sides that you know your wall is completely plumb, straight and flat. So like I said, I've been governed by this frame to the right. Otherwise you'd be using a straight edge, you'd be using levels, and you'd be making sure that everything's perfect. In this case I was governed by the wall and the frame to the right, so that's what we're working from. So with this, you just got to get used to using a straight edge. It can be tough, but with practice, you'll do a good job. So that's that. It's all ruled off. Now we wait 30 to 40 minutes, and then what we do is we get the devil float out. And basically a devil float, remember the float I was showing you at the beginning of the video? All I do is screw 4, depending on the size, 5 screws, roughly 20 millimeters apart, 2 centimeters distance, and you just screw it so the tip is hanging out by about 2 mil. You don't want to go too far. And what we're doing is we're going to give the render a little spray. I'm giving it a light haze with my little sprayer again. This is just so when we're floating it, we're not going to pull all the hardwall off. And what you want to do is you want to hold the float flat to the wall, and you're literally doing a figure of 8 motions. And what this will do is if there's any ridges in your render, any ridges in the way, it's going to pull them back whilst providing a key. As you can see, it's leaving a nice key behind as we go. You want to keep the float flat to the render, and we are making it flatter by doing this. We're not just providing the key, but we're also flattening the backing plaster as we go. Again, this water, the light haze, just makes it easier to trail, makes it easier to pull back any hard wall that's any high spots that are in the way, whilst providing a key when it comes to the finished plaster. So you keep the float flat to the wall, and if you feel any areas where there's high spots, you pull them back, and what it will do, it'll also fill in any low spots as you're going. So it's basically just like floating render. We're doing the same thing, except we're also providing a key. That's the beauty of using the devil float, and that's the beauty of doing this work. As you can see, you'll see me working in an area, you'll see it in a minute. I keep coming back because there are a few high spots here. What I'm doing is I'm pulling them off and I'm getting rid of them. We don't want them there, we want them to be gone, so I'm working my float into them and then forcing them, pushing them out. So again, give it 30 to 40 minutes, give it a light spray, and then float it up. This means you'll get your wall really, really flat, ready for plastering. So now it's time to do the skimming. Okay, so it's been about 3.5 hours. I'm going to get ready to skim it. First thing we've got to do is got to scrape back the excess. It's still quite fluffy. You can see it's turning now. The colour's starting to change. Now's a good time to get on it. We don't need to dry up really, so I'll quickly show you what to do now. Get your trowel, cut back high spots. So that's all we're doing. We're just using the edges of our trowel, and we're just scraping up back any high spots. There's no crazy rocket science to this. We are literally just scraping off the ridges that were made when we used the devil float. We're just scraping it back, and that's it basically. Because when it comes to plastering, all that will get in your mix. It's just easy if we scrape it back. So like I said, 3.5 hours in, give it a nice little scrape. And also we want to add scrim tape between the hard wall and that plaster board if you're in a similar situation. You'll also see the wall to the left was plastered. I actually applied scrim tape between the plaster board and the hard wall, so don't worry about that. It's all been scraped back. Now I'm just going to give it a little spray just before I start, just so it doesn't dry up too fast. Nothing major, just a nice little haze. We should be good to go. Get a mix on, we'll get it on the wall. Job done. So now it comes to the plastering. Got a multi-finish. You only ever want to use multi-finish on top of hard wall or any backing plaster. Don't use board finish. Multi-finish, obviously it's in the title. I won't teach you how to suck eggs. But what we're doing, we're just getting a nice flat coat onto hard wall. And what you'll find when you do plaster onto hard wall, it is quite nice to plaster onto it. It sucks in at a faster rate than what it would do normal plastering. That's the only thing I will say to you. Don't expect to get huge hits on when you're plastering onto hard wall. The idea is smaller hits more often. I find hard wall, when you are plastering onto it, it does suck in a lot faster. Even when I'm plastering it the same day, it still does suck in. So try and apply your plaster flat from stage one. It just makes life easier, because if it does pull in a lot faster and catches you off guard, if you've got ridges everywhere, then it's going to be really hard to catch up. Get your plaster flat from the beginning. It just makes life 10 times easier. And what I will say is, when you are skimming, try and flatten it as you go. You don't want to cause yourself any problems further down the line, especially with hard wall. A bit more forgiving with plasterboard. Hard wall, you've got to be a bit more in the game. But saying that, I do actually love skimming on hard wall, and I do find that a lot more people are asking for it because it is a better product. It's solid. You've got it's more of a rigid background. It's better for fixings, and there's less weak points. Problem is, with dot and dabbing, you're more prone to cracking. So hard wall is a really good method of plastering, and obviously a time-tested way of doing it. And now the last thing we'll show you is I just use the speed skim after I've applied the first coat, because that will reduce the amount of bubbles you get on your mix. Problem is, because you've got the scratches and you've got the key on the hard wall, you can get trapped oxygen between your first coat. This forces your air pockets out, and it just stops any of that little rash effects you get coming through onto your second coat. So if you have got a speed skim, use it after the first coat, you'll find it'll reduce that. After that, the process of plastering is the exact same. I won't show you the rest. That's the idea of float and set. But if you did want to learn the full process of plastering, check out the link below. You can join a welcome course from Plastering Beginners, and we'll show you the full process of plastering. From mixing the plaster, plastering ceilings, we'll talk about techniques on getting the walls flat, and I'll show you the 7 steps I use to plaster a wall from start to finish. It's a completely free course from Plastering Beginners website. Click the button below, join, and not only that, you'll get emails from me, a heads up of anything we're doing in the future, any new YouTube videos, and anything of that kind. So thanks for watching, I hope you found it useful, and this is Blaine Gray of Plastering Beginners. If you like the video, please like it, and please subscribe. Thanks a lot, cheers.